You gotta hand it to Technosoft. They always made incredible music for their video games. As you can hear in the music from Herzog Zwei and in the Thunder Force series of video games. Here's something you never want to do. You never want to pick up a tank that you've just spent most of your credits buying, giving it an expensive command to attack the enemy home base, and then run out of energy right before you drop it off because you weren't paying attention, explode, and lose your tank. That's not the way to do that. Here in part 2 of the review of Herzog Zwei, or Herzog Zwei, I'm going to pronounce it the way I've always pronounced it. Herzog Zwei. I'm going to Americanize it. Zwei, because I like you. This is one of my favorite levels. There's 8 different levels that you can fight on, 8 different landscapes. Each is completely different. I've always called this one Easy Free, although I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. This is one of the coolest levels, no pun intended, even though it has snow and ice, because it has ground-based combat and water-based combat. In the levels where there was water, Herzog allowed you to buy boats as well as tanks and jeeps and motorcycles and stuff. And let's go through the entire level here from start to finish so I can try to explain this very complicated game to you. The first thing I like to do is always buy a tank and give it the command to attack the enemy home base, and then drop it off right behind the enemy base because I like to see what defenses he has there and also catch him off guard, drop the tank there, and knock a couple points off of his base. Except in this game I was stupid and exploded before I could do that. The second thing I do is start taking over the sub-bases around the board, because you need the sub-bases to earn credits. The more sub-bases or mini-bases that you have, the more credits you earn, or I should say the more quickly that you earn credits, and you need credits to buy your tanks and all that kind of stuff. What you're seeing every time that screen pops up with the ordering information in the map, that is your command screen where you can see a map of the battlefield. You can see where the enemy fighter plane transformer is, which is very helpful. And you can also hear a lot in this game. You can hear when there's combat going on and gunfire. You can hear when the enemy explodes. You can hear when they capture one of the bases. So you get very familiar with all of the distinctive sounds in this game quickly. It uses sound very well. What I'm doing now is I'm dropping guided missile launchers all around one of his bases that I'm about to take over. Each unit in the game has a totally different function, and you can give them commands. The guided missile launcher is very effective in attacking the enemy transformer. If you blow him up, he explodes and goes back to his home base, which wastes his time and gives you more time to do things. Also, it prevents him from picking up any enemy pieces or attacking your enemy pieces. I find that surrounding an enemy base with at least 3 guided missile machines, guided missile tanks or whatever they're called, is enough to keep him away. In a single-player game, you're fighting against the computer, and after you play this game a bit, you learn how the computer thinks, and he has a obsessive-compulsive disorder where he will fight you to the end for one sub-base until you've finally broken his will. And that's really his downfall, and I think once you figure that out, you can win the game pretty easily against the computer. So I'm surrounding his base with these missile launchers because I'm just going to keep knocking him back to his home base. And then when I have enough missile launchers sitting around there, and I've set up a few tanks and a refueling droid as well, when I have enough missile launchers around, I actually take over his base by sending 4 infantrymen into it. And that's how you capture a base, whether it's a neutral base or one that the computer already has occupied. I transformed into my giant robot form and blew up some of the tanks that he has defending that base. The great thing about Herzog Zwei is you can play each game totally differently. You can play the game with a strategy where you take over every base one at a time until you've just completely strangled the enemy. Or you can play the game where you just simply attack his home base time after time. The problem with that is that you eventually start running out of money, and it costs a good bit of credits to continually buy tanks, which are your most powerful ground vehicle, and give them the command to attack his home base. So I like to play it against the computer, where I take over a couple bases, just enough to make sure that I've got sufficient credits to then launch a pretty serious attack on his home base. And I'm playing... Herzog Zwei has 4 different levels of gameplay against the computer, A, B, C, and D. D being the hardest. I'm playing this one on C because I hadn't played the game for a bit, so I'm just getting back into it. I played a few games right after this on level D, which is the hardest level, and really the only difference is that they start you off with no bases, so you have to start taking them over from scratch, and it gives the computer a bit of a head start. But again, once you figure out the fact that he really has an obsessive-compulsive disorder, it's not that hard to get the edge on him. It does take a while sometimes, and I think you'll find the games on the hardest level take 20-30 minutes at least, but it's 20-30 minutes of pure joy as far as I'm concerned, because this game is so much fun to play. The controls are excellent. In this game you can see I'm just knocking him down one base at a time until I'm comfortable to launch an all-out assault on his home base. If you see one of the little units with a blinking exclamation point, that means that it's out of ammunition. This game is very detailed and in-depth in that your military units can run out of ammunition and they can actually get damaged. You can't see the damage just by looking at them. If you pick them up with your Jetfire and then go to your options screen, it'll show you the statistics on each of the vehicles on the bottom. It'll give you a couple bars down there. And you can recharge your vehicles or repair them or refuel them with ammunition by picking them up and then hovering over one of the bases that you own. And you can also buy those resupply droids that drive around, but they almost always get lost and confused. So they're practically worthless, but if you're in a tight spot and you have 2 or 3 missile launchers laid out around the enemy base that you're trying to take over, and the enemy is actually being smart and launching tanks at them, they do tend to either get destroyed or run out of ammunition if it's something that's shooting back at the tanks. It's a very in-depth game. Here we go. Now I'm attacking the main base. Alright, you see at the top there, the bars going down. E, that's energy. D is damage. Either of those gets all the way down to the bottom. You explode and die. If you try to carry units around in your plane form, your energy bar goes down far quicker, which is why it's very practical to have some bases captured that are close to his home base. I'm just stomping on him right now. At this point, he's pretty much destroyed. There's nothing he can do. In part 3 of this review, I'll show you all the different levels now that you've seen a full game being played. Each level's a bit different. Some of them have lava, some of them have 2 layers. There's one that has, that you saw in part 1, that had a huge swamp in the middle that's difficult for your tanks and stuff to drive over. There's one that's all islands, which is really cool. After you crush the enemy, it shows you your statistics, how long it took you to do that, and that's a full game from start to finish. In part 3, we'll get into the different levels, and in part 4, we'll watch another full game, which was more challenging than this past one that you just saw.